"You can't park there, Sarah, you know that," Delaney Pierce said, her voice cold and clipped as she gestured toward the spot beside the sidewalk where my car was sitting. "It's a violation of the community code. We've been over this." I looked up from the paperwork in my hands and met her eyes. The morning sun caught in the edges of her sharp jawline, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Delaney," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I've lived here for nearly a decade. That spot has always been open for parking. There's no sign, no notification. If the rules have changed, why wasn't I told?" She folded her arms and leaned in slightly, her posture radiating control. "The board posted the new parking regulations last month. You must have missed the notices. Doesn't matter. You're in violation." I felt my jaw tighten. This was the first in a series of small confrontations that felt less about community standards and more like targeted harassment. Delaney was always watching, always waiting for me to slip, and I wasn't about to give her that satisfaction. "I'm Sarah Malik," I said quietly but firmly, "civil engineer by trade, and more importantly, I'm the daughter of James Malik, the man who built this house in this neighborhood, brick by brick. When he passed, this place wasn't just a property, it was his legacy, my legacy." She didn't flinch, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, maybe irritation, maybe calculation. "Legacy doesn't exempt you from rules, Sarah." "No," I replied, "but it means I know how to protect what's mine, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else push me out." Delaney's lips pressed into a thin line. "If you don't move your car by this afternoon, the fine doubles." The threat hung heavy in the air. I pulled my phone from my pocket, fingers already moving to document this exchange. But this wasn't about a parking spot anymore. It was about control, ownership, respect. That oak tree in my front yard creaked softly in the breeze, a tree my father had planted on the day my mother was admitted to the hospital years ago. It was the first symbol of hope for me, the promise that roots could hold firm no matter what storms raged. I stepped back toward my porch, the wood worn smooth by years of hands, laughter, and silent tears. The swing Dad built still swayed faintly, a reminder that some things deserved fighting for. "You know, Delaney," I said as I turned to head inside, "this neighborhood isn't just a place to live. It's a history, a story of families who fought to build something better." She called after me. "That may be true, but you'll find your story doesn't get to rewrite the rules." I didn't answer. Instead, I dialed Mark Jensen, my old college friend and a sharp attorney. If this was going to be a war, I needed someone who knew the battlefield. Later, as I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight filter through that old oak, I thought about what my father used to say. Roots aren't just where you plant yourself. They're what keep you standing when the world tries to push you down. This wasn't just about a parking space, it was about dignity, about legacy, about making sure the fight wasn't lost before it began. So tell me, where are you watching from? If you've ever had your space challenged, your rights questioned by someone with more power, you know this feeling. Stick around, because this quiet neighborhood battle is about to turn into something much bigger. And just so you know, the oak tree will be back in this story. It's more than just wood and leaves. It's a symbol of what's at stake. The days after that first confrontation passed with an uneasy quiet, but that silence was misleading. Behind closed doors, the HOA was already preparing their next move. Notices would come. Fines, complaints about the lawn, the gate codes, anything to wear me down. I spent nights poring over HOA documents, researching every rule and bylaw. I knew my rights, but more importantly, I needed to find where the HOA overstepped theirs. Each minor infraction they flagged was a small jab, but together they formed a pattern, a deliberate push to force me out, or at least make me feel unwelcome in the home my family built. One afternoon, I overheard neighbors whispering as I passed. Some offered quiet support, others avoided eye contact. I realized this wasn't just my fight. It was a community caught between tradition and control. I remembered the last summer my father was alive. We'd sit under that oak tree, his rough hands steady on my shoulder, telling me stories of the neighborhood's early days. How neighbors helped each other, how rules were meant to protect, not punish. If Delaney and her board wanted to control this place, they were going to have to fight more than just me. They'd have to fight the legacy of the Malik family. And I wasn't about to back down. Days after the parking spat, the neighborhood pool became the next battleground. I remember that morning vividly. The sun just hitting the horizon, birds still waking up. My kids, Mia and Alex, were bouncing with excitement, towels and goggles in hand. The pool had always been our summer refuge, a place where time slowed, where laughter filled the air and the weight of everything else lifted. But the moment we stepped toward the gate, Delaney was there, like a sentinel, waiting. "Sarah," she said, voice sharp enough to cut through the morning's calm. "You know the rules. Your guests aren't on the approved list. They can't enter." I blinked, glancing behind me at my mother and niece, both smiling and ready to swim. "Mom and Ellie? They're family. They've always come with us." Delaney's eyes narrowed. "Guests need to be registered 48 hours in advance. You didn't notify the board. It's a violation." A chill settled in my stomach. "Delaney, this isn't just a pool party. It's family." Her lip curled in a smile, thin and cruel. "Rules don't bend for you, Malik." I swallowed hard, trying not to show how much this stung. This wasn't just bureaucratic nitpicking, it was personal. "Look, I don't want trouble, but I'm not going to exclude my family over some petty rule no one else follows." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Last month, you brought in 5 guests when only 2 were allowed. You already crossed the line. If you try to enter again without clearance, I'll have to call the police." The threat hung there, heavier than the humid summer air. "Delaney," I started, but she cut me off. "I'm serious, this isn't a negotiation." Around us, a few neighbors glanced over, some frowning, others pretending not to see. Mia tugged my hand, her usual summer glow dimming. "Mom, why is she being so mean?" I forced a smile. "Sometimes rules can be tough, honey, but we'll figure it out." Delaney's phone buzzed. She glanced down and smirked. "Better make it easy on yourself." Then she pulled out her phone and dialed. The arrival of the patrol car was swift. A man stepped out, his badge gleaming, scanning the scene. "Problem here?" he asked. Delaney explained quickly, the words clipped but loaded with accusation. I met the officer's gaze, calm but firm. "My family is being denied access to community facilities without cause. They've never been an issue before." He nodded, making notes. "I'll have to check the HOA rules. Until then, no disruptions." The tension broke like a held breath, released, but the damage lingered. Later that day, sitting on the porch swing beneath the old oak, I traced the knots in the wood. This swing? Dad built it with his own hands, carving out memories with each smooth plank. That swing had held me steady through storms far worse than HOA politics. I thought of him and the quiet strength he carried. This fight was mine now. Not just to protect a parking spot or pool pass, but to defend a family's dignity. Delaney had called the cops. It wasn't just power she craved, it was control. But I wasn't about to let her win. I grabbed my phone and called Mark. "Mark, it's getting worse. The pool, the cops. I don't want a war, but I'm running out of options." He sighed. "You're dealing with a classic power grab. They want you out. Or at least to make you so miserable you leave. You need to document everything, no slip-ups." I nodded, the weight settling. This was only the beginning. And that old oak tree outside, it reminded me that roots could hold firm, even when everything tried to shake you loose. So if you've ever had someone try to push you out of a place you love, if you've faced unfair rules or threats, you're not alone. Where are you watching from? What would you do if the people meant to protect a community turned into its biggest threat? Stick with me, this story's just heating up. The morning after the pool incident, the neighborhood felt different. Like a quiet tension settled over the manicured lawns and freshly trimmed hedges. I wasn't the only one feeling it. Across the street, Marcus Field stood at his driveway, sipping coffee, his gaze flicking toward my house with something unreadable. Marcus had been on the HOA board for years, long enough to know the ins and outs, the politics, and the secrets most neighbors never saw. But lately, something about him had shifted. When I caught his eye that morning, he nodded hesitantly, fingers tightening around the rim of his cup. No words, just a flicker of acknowledgement that spoke louder than 1,000 apologies. Later that week, Marcus sat at the HOA meeting, his usual confident posture replaced by subtle signs of unease. A slight tremor in his hands, the way he avoided Delaney's gaze, She dominated the room like a queen guarding her throne, but Marcus seemed caught between loyalty and conscience. During a heated exchange over another fine I'd received, a claim that my garden gnome was unapproved decor, Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. When Delaney grilled me aggressively, Marcus's jaw tightened and I caught him exhale sharply, a flicker of guilt or doubt, maybe both. After the meeting, Marcus lingered near the exit. I approached cautiously. "Marcus," I said softly, "you don't have to pretend. I see what's happening." He looked away for a moment, voice low. "Sarah, it's complicated. The board, Delaney, she's not just anyone. She's got her claws in deeper than you think." "Does that mean you agree with her?" I asked, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "No," he replied quickly. "It's just, there are pressures, favors, things that can't be spoken out loud. I want to help, but I'm stuck." His eyes met mine, honest but conflicted. "I'm watching, and I'm sorry if I haven't done enough." That moment stayed with me, the silent witness caught in a web too tangled to escape. Marcus was a sign that not everyone on the board was blind to the truth. Back at home, I pulled out my father's old photo albums, thumbing through pictures of neighborhood barbecues, kids playing in yards, neighbors chatting like family. The community I'd grown up in felt miles away from this cold, controlled version Delaney was shaping. The porch swing creaked softly in the breeze, the oak tree casting long shadows. I remembered Dad's voice, steady and sure. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with fists, but with quiet strength. Determined not to let Marcus's hesitation be the end of the story, I started keeping a detailed log. Dates, times, conversations, every fine, every threat. Documentation was my weapon now. One evening, while reviewing HOA emails, I noticed a pattern. Selective enforcement aimed mostly at me and a couple of other families who'd dared to question the board. The next day, Marcus stopped by my house. He brought something, a worn folder filled with meeting notes and financial documents. "I can't say much," he whispered, "but you might find these useful." His hands trembled as he handed over the papers. "Be careful, Delaney's watching. She doesn't like loose ends." I nodded, gratitude mixing with unease. The game was changing. That night, as I placed the folder on my kitchen table, the house felt both heavier and somehow alive with possibility. I wasn't just fighting rules anymore. I was unraveling a story someone wanted buried. If you've ever felt alone in a fight, like the system was bigger than you, remember, sometimes the quietest voices are the ones most afraid. But even silence can be broken. Where are you watching from? Have you ever had someone in your circle who seemed torn between what's right and what's easy? Hang tight, there's more coming. And where are you watching from? Have you ever faced a moment when someone close to the conflict held back, unsure whether to stand or stay silent? Share your story below. Let's hear your voice. The folder Marcus handed over was just the beginning. Over the next few days, I sifted through a pile of HOA notices, each one more absurd than the last. First, a fine for my garden gnome. Yes, a little ceramic elf perched by the porch. Apparently, it violated some obscure clause about unauthorized exterior decorations. I stared at the notice, incredulous. My father's old gnome, a gift from a neighbor decades ago, suddenly deemed a crime? Next came a letter about improper gate usage, something about a guest who didn't sign in properly, even though I'd followed every step. The HOA's tone was cold, formal, almost mocking. They weren't just sending warnings, they were piling on pressure, and it stank of something personal. I called Mark Jensen. "This is harassment, right? I mean, I've never seen anything like this." He chuckled dryly. "Welcome to HOA hell. They're testing boundaries, see how far they can push you before you crack." I laughed, but it wasn't a relief. "So what do? I'm not cracking." "Document everything, respond to every notice, don't ignore them, and keep your cool. Emotional responses only give them ammo." The community meetings grew more hostile. Delaney led every charge, her voice dripping with authority. She'd single me out in front of neighbors, twisting facts, smearing my intentions. It felt like public shaming, like I'd become the neighborhood's scapegoat. Yet, I noticed a few faces in the crowd soften. Some whispered support, a nod here, a quick "I'm sorry" there. The undercurrent was there, but fear kept most silent. One afternoon, I saw Marcus near the playground, watching from the sidelines. His eyes met mine briefly, hesitant but steady. No words, just that small connection. A reminder I wasn't alone. In response, I started a blog. Nothing fancy, just an honest account of the creeping oppression, the petty rules weaponized against families. It was therapeutic, and slowly, neighbors began to reach out. Emails trickled in, stories of fines, threats, the subtle but relentless squeeze of the HOA, the same pattern, same power grab. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a community caught between tradition and tyranny. Late one night, as I sat drafting my latest post, the porch swing creaked in the wind. That old oak tree loomed outside, casting long shadows across the yard. I ran my fingers over the worn wood, feeling the weight of generations behind me. My father's words echoed again. Roots don't just hold you steady, they remind you where you come from and who you fight for. I decided then, no matter what came next, I'd fight with everything I had. When Delaney delivered another notice, this time threatening legal action for repeated infractions, I didn't flinch. I drafted a calm, measured reply, citing HOA bylaws with Mark's advice carefully woven in. I could hear the murmur of neighbors outside as I sent it. The house felt alive, charged with quiet defiance. This was more than property disputes or petty fines. It was about fairness, respect, and standing up when silence felt safer. Are you watching from a place where power feels overwhelming, where small battles seem endless? You're not alone. The fight is far from over, but every stand, no matter how small, pushes back against control. Stay with me. The next chapter brings new players, unexpected alliances, and decisions that could change everything. Late one evening, restless and tired of the daily battles, I found myself in the basement, digging through dusty boxes my father had left behind. The dim light flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the cold concrete floor. Each creak of the floorboard felt louder than it should, every breath echoing in the silence. I wasn't just rummaging through memories. I was searching for answers, for leverage, for anything that could help me unravel the tightening noose the HOA had wrapped around my family's home. The air smelled faintly of mildew and old paper. As I shuffled through stacks of folders and photo albums, a heavy wooden cabinet caught my eye, locked, sturdy, and ancient. The kind of thing your father locks away when he wants to keep secrets safe. Pulling at the handle, I realized it was sealed shut. Frustrated, I scanned the cluttered workbench nearby for tools, a rusty screwdriver and an old hammer. Enough to pry it open. I hesitated, then started working, the metal groaning against the wood. Inside were stacks of faded papers. HOA meeting minutes, financial statements, correspondence, all dating back years. My fingers trembled slightly as I flipped through pages, scanning for anything that could explain Delaney's sudden thirst for control. One document stood out, a handwritten note, its ink faded but the words sharp. Pool access restrictions must be enforced selectively, target those who resist or question, favor those who align with the board's interests. Remember, power is maintained through division. My heart raced. This wasn't just petty enforcement, it was a calculated plan. Further digging revealed budget discrepancies, large sums allocated to community improvements but funneled through vague accounts, some linked to businesses owned by board members, including Delaney. A cold realization settled. The fight wasn't just about rules or legacy, it was about money, influence, and silencing dissent. The basement seemed to close in around me. Flickering light, the smell of dust and secrets, and the weight of decades of deception pressing down. I took photos of every page, careful not to miss details. My mind raced with possibilities. Could this be the key to turning the tide? Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, heart pounding. "Who's there?" I whispered. No answer. Just the empty basement. Shadows stretching and retreating like ghosts. I grabbed the folder and hurried upstairs, locking the cabinet back the way I found it. This evidence was dangerous, and I wasn't about to leave it lying around. Later, at the kitchen table, I spread the documents out beneath the soft glow of the lamp. Marcus's warning echoed in my mind. Delaney didn't like loose ends. I thought about the porch swing outside, the oak tree standing silent sentry through years of storms, watching over our family's fight. the same way I felt the weight of the truth now. Heavy, but necessary. I messaged Marcus immediately. Found something. This changes everything. His reply came quickly, terse. Be careful. They're watching. That night, sleep came in fits. The basement's shadows haunted my dreams, but so did the flicker of hope, a chance to expose the tangled web and reclaim what was rightfully ours. If you've ever stumbled on a secret that changed everything you thought you knew, you'll understand that mix of fear and adrenaline. Where are you watching from? Have you ever found something hidden, something no one wanted you to see? This story is just getting started. The moment Marcus handed me that folder, I knew the game had changed. But it wasn't just about uncovering dirt, it was about turning that dirt into power. After that basement discovery, the nights blurred into endless hours of poring over documents, cross-referencing meeting minutes, financials, and correspondence. Every line hinted at something more: kickbacks, favoritism, whispers of deals no one in the neighborhood was supposed to know about. One morning, I sat in my home office when my phone buzzed, a message from Marcus. Meet me at the park, need to talk, quiet. That afternoon, we met beneath the sprawling oak tree near the playground, its branches dipping low as if to listen. Marcus's usual confidence was replaced by a wary edge. Sarah, this isn't just board politics, there's pressure from outside, developers eyeing the land, big money moving in. Delaney's the front woman. I nodded. Sounds like corruption with teeth. He glanced around before lowering his voice. I've been recording some HOA meetings, stuff Delaney doesn't want public. I'm nervous, but you deserve to see it. He pulled out his phone and played a clipped audio recording. Delaney and another board member talking about tightening control and removing obstacles. My heart pounded. This was the leverage I needed. Days later, Mark Jensen came over, laptop in tow, ready to help strategize. These documents and recordings, they're solid, but we have to be surgical. One wrong move, and they'll come back swinging harder. We mapped out a plan, gathering community testimonies, filing formal complaints, and, most importantly, getting legal experts involved to scrutinize those murky financial trails. I started discreetly recording HOA meetings myself, blending in with neighbors who were growing restless. Every comment, every slip was potential ammunition. At times, the tension felt suffocating, but small moments kept me grounded, like watching Mia and Alex playing under the oak tree, their laughter piercing the heaviness. That tree was more than just shade, it was a symbol of endurance. Like us, it weathered storms, but stood tall. Humor sneaked in too, like the time Delaney complained publicly about my unauthorized use of the community mailbox. I fired back with a smile. Funny, it's the only mailbox with my name on it. Those little cracks in her armor fueled me. Marcus, too, seemed lighter, despite the risks. He started showing up to community gatherings, not just as a board member, but as an ally. One evening, over coffee, he admitted, "I'm scared, Sarah, but seeing you push back makes me think maybe change is possible." I smiled, tired but fierce. Fear's a good motivator, but courage? Courage is what gets us through. This wasn't just a fight about rules anymore. It was about reclaiming trust, dignity, and the very soul of our neighborhood. And it was just beginning. Wherever you're watching from, if you've ever felt the sting of unfair power or found strength in unlikely allies, you're part of this story too. Stick close. The next moves will be the hardest and the most rewarding. The moment came like a quiet storm. After weeks of gathering evidence, recording meetings, collecting testimonies, and lining up legal support, it was time to make a move. Not with loud protests or dramatic confrontations, but with strategy, precision, and patience. I called a neighborhood forum, an open invitation to everyone. No fanfare, no flashy ads, just a simple flyer posted in the community mailbox. Join us, talk, listen, learn. Delaney wasn't thrilled. Her glare was obvious when she heard about it. I half expected her to storm the meeting, but she stayed back, calculating. Marcus was there too, sitting near the back. He looked tense but determined, his eyes scanning the room like a man who had stepped out of shadows. The community gathered in the small recreation hall, the same place where board meetings had been held in hushed tones behind closed doors. Now, the floor was ours. Started by sharing what I'd uncovered, the documents from the basement, Marcus's recordings, the financial irregularities. Faces shifted in the crowd, whispers rising like waves. Some neighbors nodded, others looked stunned. "It's more than rules being broken," I said, voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "It's about trust betrayed, about power wielded to silence and control." Questions came, sharp, pointed, some from longtime residents who had felt the squeeze but never dared speak up. I invited neighbors to share their experiences. One by one, voices broke the silence, stories surfacing of fines, threats, and intimidation tactics. Delaney's grip on the neighborhood was slipping, one story at a time. After the forum, Marcus pulled me aside. This is bigger than any of us imagined," he said, voice low. I nodded. "And it's only the start." We sent the evidence package to county authorities and prepared for the inevitable backlash. But the neighborhood was rallying behind us, emboldened by truth. Days later at the next HOA meeting, the atmosphere was electric. Delaney tried to steer the conversation, but the board members who once nodded silently now questioned her. Whispers of dissent floated through the room. During the public comment period, Marcus stood and with a shaky voice revealed details he'd kept hidden. The favors, the off-the-books deals, the selective enforcement. It was a crack in the facade. Delaney's control was fracturing. I watched as the room shifted, alliances realigning. The power was balancing, if only slightly. Afterwards, neighbors approached me with thanks, with hope, even with apologies for their silence. That night I sat on the porch swing, the oak tree's silhouette etched against the stars. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt like victory was within reach. I thought about my father's words about roots and strength and how sometimes the fiercest battles are fought quietly, deliberately. If you've ever stood up when the odds were stacked, when silence seemed safer, you know what this moment feels like. After Marcus's confession and the neighborhood forum, everything shifted. The walls Delaney had built around herself started to crack, and the community's quiet murmur turned into a chorus. At first it was subtle. I noticed neighbors lingering longer in the common areas, exchanging knowing glances, sharing hushed conversations, small acts of solidarity. A wave from across the street, a casual, "How are you holding up?" became lifelines. One afternoon, I was tending to my garden when Mrs. Ramirez, a woman I barely knew, stopped by with a pie. "For you?" she said, eyes soft but firm. "We're behind you, Sarah." It wasn't just food, it was a reminder that this fight wasn't mine alone. But Delaney wasn't ready to surrender. New fines arrived, more aggressive this time, targeting the fence I'd built after the last storm, and a claim that I'd installed unapproved outdoor lighting. Each notice was like a jab, but I refused to flinch. Instead, Mark helped me craft calm, factual responses, pointing out the HOA's missteps and violations. The tension built toward the next board meeting, a gathering that promised to be more explosive than any before. When the evening arrived, the community center was packed. The air buzzed with anticipation and quiet defiance. Delaney took her usual seat at the head of the table, but the confident spark in her eyes had dimmed. Neighbors once silent stepped forward during public comments, sharing stories of similar harassment, unfair fines and threats. Their voices, once drowned out, now filled the room with a steady, unwavering force. Marcus stood beside me, his presence a silent pillar of support. When it was my turn, I spoke from the heart, not just about documents or laws, but about the soul of our neighborhood. "This place is more than rules and regulations," I said. "It's where families grow, where memories are made. And it belongs to all of us, not just a select few." The room held its breath. Delaney tried to interject, but the momentum had shifted. By the end of the night, the board voted, Delaney's power suspended pending a formal investigation. It was a moment of triumph, but also a call to vigilance. Walking home under the glow of street lamps, the oak tree outside my porch stood tall, its leaves whispering in the night breeze. That tree had seen decades of storms, yet it remained rooted. So would I. If you're watching, remember, change often begins with a single voice willing to speak, a community willing to listen. The fight isn't over, but together we're stronger. The night of the big board meeting was thick with tension, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes every breath feel heavier. I sat near the back of the room, the worn wooden chairs creaking beneath me, eyes fixed on Delaney as she took her seat at the head of the table. She wore her usual polished smile, but it barely masked the flicker of uncertainty beneath. The room buzzed quietly as neighbors filled the seats, their faces lit by the dim overhead lights and the weight of what was to come. I glanced over at Marcus, who shifted uncomfortably, hands clenched into fists. I gave him a reassuring nod. When the meeting was called to order, Delaney launched into her usual spiel, talking about protecting community standards and maintaining harmony. Her voice was sharp, but today it carried an edge of desperation. I waited my turn, heart steady but nerves prickling. When the floor opened for public comment, I stood, smoothing my shirt as eyes turned toward me. This neighborhood is built on trust and fairness, I began. But what we've seen in recent months isn't fairness, it's manipulation, selective rules enforced to silence those who speak up. Murmurs rippled through the room. I laid out the evidence, the financial documents, the recordings Marcus and I had collected, the testimonies from neighbors. I could see some board members shifting uncomfortably, faces tightening. Delaney's eyes flickered with anger as I continued. This isn't about property values or lawn decor. It's about power being wielded without accountability. Then Marcus stood, his voice wavering but firm. I've been part of this board a long time, and I won't stay silent any longer. There's been favoritism, hidden agendas, actions that go against everything this community should stand for. A hush fell. Delaney opened her mouth, ready to counter, but the room's energy had shifted. The board members exchanged glances. Some no longer seemed so certain of their loyalty. Neighbors began speaking up, sharing their own stories of fines, intimidation, and exclusion. The weight of collective voices was undeniable. Delaney tried to regain control, raising her voice. These accusations are baseless. This board acts in the community's best interest. But the room didn't back down. When it came time for the vote, the outcome was clear. The majority agreed to suspend Delaney's powers pending a full investigation. As the gavel fell, relief and exhaustion washed over me. The fight was far from over, but tonight marked a turning point. After the meeting, neighbors gathered outside, some shaking my hand, others offering quiet thanks. Marcus caught my eye, his expression a mix of relief and renewed resolve. Walking home, the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. That old oak tree outside my porch stood sentinel as always, its branches steady despite years of storms. I paused, running a hand over the rough bark, feeling the weight of everything behind me and the road ahead. My father's words echoed again. Roots don't break easily. They hold firm through whatever comes. I smiled, knowing that no matter what battles lay ahead, I wasn't standing alone. If you've ever faced a moment when truth collides with power, when speaking up risks everything, you understand this night, the fragile hope, the hard-won victories. Where are you watching from? What's your story of standing tall when the world tries to silence you? The journey continues. Stay with me. The days after the board's vote felt like walking on a tightrope stretched thin. Delaney didn't go quietly. Her calls and messages came fast, threats veiled in polite words, warnings about lawsuits, whispers of consequences that could drag on for months. Mark sat with me one afternoon, his face grim but steady. Brace yourself. She's got the resources and won't back down easily, but we're prepared. I nodded, trying to steady the churn in my stomach. This was the war's aftermath, not the end, but the murky space where battles linger and the fight turns personal. Neighbors reached out more openly now. Mrs. Ramirez stopped by with homemade cookies, her smile warm but tired. We're with you, Sarah. Don't let them wear you down. Others weren't so brave, yet. A few who'd whispered support pulled back, fearful of the backlash. That hesitation stung more than any fine. Marcus called one evening. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger before. I want to help more. I could hear the weight behind his words and offered what little comfort I could. You're here now. That's what counts. The community began slowly healing. Meetings became forums for rebuilding trust. Some board members resigned quietly, worn down by the weight of exposure and public scrutiny. But the wounds remained. A few families left the neighborhood, tired of the constant tension. It was heartbreaking to see familiar faces disappear, the stories of shared summers and porch talks fading. One evening, as I sat on the porch swing beneath the oak tree, I thought about the cost. Fighting for justice wasn't clean or easy. It was messy, exhausting, sometimes lonely, but it was necessary. I shared these reflections on the blog, hoping my honesty might encourage others caught in similar storms. Humor still found its way in, the time a disgruntled board member tried to challenge my right to plant a vegetable garden. "That's not community standard," she'd declared, only to have me retort with a grin. "Well, it's certainly a fresh approach." Those moments of light reminded me why I fought, not just to win, but to reclaim the joy in my home. Marcus and I started working on a community initiative, planning workshops on residents' rights and HOA transparency. Turning pain into progress felt like a victory. As night deepened, the oak tree swayed gently, its branches casting dancing shadows. I touched the worn wood of the swing and whispered, "We're not done yet." If you've ever faced the long shadows after a hard fight, felt the cost but held on, that's what keeps us human. The day of reckoning wasn't marked by fireworks or loud fanfare. Instead, the community center buzzed with a charged silence, every chair filled, every face a mix of hope and wary anticipation. I sat near the front, papers in hand, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the weight of what we were about to unfold. Across the room, Delaney's posture was rigid, her usual confident smirk replaced by a tight line. When the hearing began, voices echoed. Neighbors stepping up, telling stories of petty fines, intimidation, exclusion. Each testimony chipped away at the fortress Delaney had built. Marcus took the stand, hands trembling slightly, his voice steady. He detailed the secret deals, the manipulation behind closed doors. It wasn't easy for him, years of loyalty clashing with conscience, but he stood firm. When it was my turn, I spoke plainly, not just with facts and evidence, but with heart. "This community belongs to all of us," I said, meeting eyes across the room. "It's not a game for power or profit. It's the place where our children grow, where memories live." I shared the documents, the recordings, the stories, proof that the board had broken trust. Delaney tried to interrupt, her voice rising in desperation, but the room no longer followed her. The judge, or the mediator, rather, listened carefully, the gravity of our words settling like a tangible force. By the end, the verdict was clear. Delaney's position was terminated, and a new, transparent board would be elected. Applause rippled through the room, a wave of relief and triumph. Outside, neighbors hugged, tears mingling with smiles. Marcus approached me, eyes bright with a mix of exhaustion and hope. Walking home under the gentle light of street lamps, the oak tree near my porch stood sentinel, its branches whispering promises of endurance. That night, I sat in the swing, the worn wood creaking softly beneath me. The fight had been long, painful, but justice had prevailed. If you've ever stood up when the odds were against you, when speaking truth meant risking everything, you know this moment. The sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood that had seen so much in such a short time. The tension that had gripped every corner slowly softened into something lighter, a cautious hope. I stood on my porch, hands resting on the familiar worn wood of the swing. The same swing my father had built, the oak tree above still standing tall and steady, its leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. It felt like the neighborhood was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. The new board was in place, transparent, accountable, and ready to rebuild trust. The fights weren't over, not entirely, change never is. But for the first time in a long while, the community felt like a family again. Marcus stopped by that afternoon, carrying a box of papers and a tentative smile. "Feels different, doesn't it?" he said, settling onto the swing beside me. "Yeah," I replied, eyes on the horizon. "Feels like a chance." We talked about what had been lost, neighbors who'd moved on, years of quiet fear, and what was gained, resilience, courage, and a reminder that standing up matters. The porch light flickered on as dusk settled, illuminating the carved initials on the swing's armrest. J.M. etched by my father decades ago. That mark wasn't just a signature, it was a promise, a legacy. As I traced the letters with my finger, I thought about the journey, how every small act of resistance, every whispered conversation, every piece of hidden evidence had led here. To dignity reclaimed. I caught my breath, feeling the weight of history and the promise of tomorrow. "We don't always get to choose the battles," I said softly to Marcus, "but we choose how we fight them." He nodded, and sometimes the quietest fights leave the loudest echoes. The neighborhood's future wasn't about perfect harmony or spotless lawns. It was about fairness, respect, and knowing that our roots, like this tree, could weather whatever storms came next. If you're watching this, know you're not invisible. Your fight matters. Your voice counts. The fight for what's right isn't always loud or easy. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and deeply personal. As I've learned, standing up for justice and dignity isn't just about winning battles. It's about protecting the legacy we inherit and pass on. Wherever you are, whatever your story, your voice matters. Have you faced unfairness in your own community? How did you stand your ground? Share your experiences below and let us know where you're watching from. You're not alone in this fight.